can you convince the world of something so unbelievable with nothing but a stunning lack of evidence? Does a lack of evidence automatically discount a story? What if the lack of evidence is the best evidence you've got? Welcome to Strange and Unexplained with me, Daisy Egan. I saw a post recently that said any UFO that might visit our solar system would probably just be filled with some other solar system's shitty billionaires. I suppose that might be what all those fish thought when those billionaires went down in the submersible that imploded on itself. Call me an optimist, but I would hope that any civilization that could figure out how to travel to different solar systems would have also figured out a more egalitarian and humane form of government. Then again, I suppose that's what the fish thought too. And also, why do alien abduction stories all include a catch-and-release scenario? If we somehow managed to make it to another planet with life on it, I don't think we'd experiment on them and then let them go back, you know? We don't even do that with animals from our own planet. At the very least, you'd think aliens would wipe our memories if they were going to drop us back on Earth after probing us and whatnot. What good does it do them to have a few people running around and claiming to have been abducted by aliens and experimented on? Unless it's some kind of psychological experiment to see how humans react to stories of alien abductions. And perhaps the reason there aren't too many stories these days of people being abducted and experimented on and then dropped back off on Earth is because the aliens already got all the data they need back in the 70s when it seems like there was a new story of an alien abduction just about every month. Travis Walton was born and raised in Arizona. Originally from Phoenix, he and his 5 siblings and their single mom, Mary, moved to the mountains of Snowflake, Arizona, a town founded by a pair of Mormon dudes named Erastus Snow and Jordan William Flake. No joke. In 1878. I have to imagine they were just sitting around one day and one of them said, "Wouldn't it be funny if we founded a town and named it after ourselves?" And so they did. Anyway, Snowflake boasted the largest ponderosa pine forest in the world. And where there are trees, stranger, there are people who want to cut them down. In the fall of 1975, 22-year-old Travis Walton was working for such people on a forestry crew run by Mike Rogers, who'd won a contract to clear out a 1,277-acre area of the Apache Sitgreaves National Forest. What a fun thing to win! By October 20th, Mike and his crew were behind schedule, and according to a book published in 1989 titled UFO Abductions, A Dangerous Game by Philip J. Klass, Mike told his contracting officer, quote, "I cannot honestly say whether or not we will finish on time. However, we are working every day with as much manpower as I can hire. I will not stop work until the job is finished or until I am asked to stop. I have had considerable trouble keeping a full crew on the job. The area is very thick, and the guys have poor morale because of this. We will keep working and trying hard." End quote. On November 5th, Mike and his crew, which consisted of Travis and 5 other men, Steve Pierce, John Goulet, Alan Dallas, Ken Peterson, and Dwayne Smith, had been regularly working 12-hour days to keep from falling too far behind schedule. The men worked that day from 6 a.m. until 6 p.m. when they stopped work for the day and headed back home to Snowflake, about 50 miles away. All 7 men were crammed into Mike's pickup truck on their way down the mountain when they noticed a bright light through the trees about 100 yards ahead. Travis would later recall, quote, "I idly thought that the glow was the sun going down in the west. Then it occurred to me that the sun had set half an hour ago." End quote. Dwayne told the guys it looked like a plane had crashed in the woods, but then Alan spotted something and yelled that it was a flying saucer. Mike stopped the truck and the men saw what they would later describe as a, quote, "large silver disc 8 feet tall and 20 feet in diameter." Travis was the only one to get out of the truck. I can relate. I don't know what it is, but I tend to run toward danger rather than away from it. When I spotted a black bear in my neighbor's yard this past summer, I ran toward it while my husband screamed at me from our backyard to get the hell inside. Listen, if not friend, why friend-shaped? Anyway, Travis was standing directly under this thing when it started making a weird sound, at which point he turned and started to run back to the truck. But it was too late. An incredibly bright beam of light shot out from the undercarriage of the saucer and caught Travis. Travis was lifted up as if by an invisible claw about 10 feet before promptly being hurled back down to the ground. Walton would later tell Larry King that the men said it looked like some kind of explosion, like a grenade had gone off and he'd been thrown from it. Mike took off in the truck and sped down the road for about 10 miles before coming to a stop. The thing, whatever it was, wasn't chasing them, and the men decided they needed to go back and get Travis, whom they'd just left lying there. But when they got back to the spot from which Travis had been blasted, there was no Travis. Indeed, there was no sign of anything having happened there at all. No tracks, no debris, nothing disturbed, just a dark and empty clearing. The men drove back to Snowflake and called the police and told them one of their crew had gotten lost and they couldn't find him. Crew member Ken Peterson would later say, quote, "If I was to tell them about the UFO on the phone, he might have thought it was a crazy joke or something and hung up on me," end quote. Deputy Sheriff Chuck Ellison came out to meet with them, at which point they laid out the story. They'd seen a flying saucer, and their friend got briefly caught in its beam, got thrown to the ground, and then was nowhere to be found when they got their wits about them and went back to look for him. Ellison seemed to believe what they were saying, or was at least going along with it, and called in Sheriff Marlon Gillespie, who arrived in the sheriff office's four-wheel drive along with Deputy Sheriff Ken Copeland, Navajo County. They sent deputies out to look for Travis. They also went out to Travis's home and his mother's house on the chance he was just chilling there. He was not. Travis, it seemed, had blooped right off the face of the earth. When Travis came to, he was in Heber, roughly a third of the way between the National Forest and Snowflake. He was disoriented and extremely dehydrated. He found a phone booth and called his brother-in-law Grant Neff. In the time Travis had been missing, his family had gotten a bunch of prank calls claiming to either be Travis or know where he was. Dubious though he was, Grant picked up Travis's brother Dwayne, and the men drove the 33 miles to Heber where the person on the phone said they were, and there they found Travis waiting for them in a phone booth. It was well after midnight. He was, as he would later describe it in his book Fire in the Sky, The Walton Experience, in an incredible mental state difficult to describe. In his brother-in-law's truck on their way back to Snowflake, Travis babbled a bit incoherently, saying, quote, "They were awful, white skin, great big eyes." He looked at the clock and said, quote, "If it's already after midnight, I must have been unconscious for a couple hours, because I only remember about an hour or an hour and a half inside that thing." Grant and Dwayne were confused, to say the least. Dwayne told Travis to feel his face, and Travis was like, "What the fuck, I shaved this morning and this feels like I haven't shaved in a week." And that's when Dwayne told him, "Travis, you've been missing for 5 days." Strangers, it's 2026. We are resolved to treat ourselves better. One super easy way to begin is by cutting down on ultra-processed foods. And Wildgrain is here to deliver fresh, healthy breads, pastas, and pastries right to your door. Wildgrain is the first bake-from-frozen subscription box for sourdough breads, artisanal pastries, and fresh pastas. Plus, all items conveniently bake in 25 minutes or less. Unlike many store-bought options, Wildgrain uses simple ingredients you can pronounce and a slow fermentation process that can be easier on your belly and richer in nutrients and antioxidants. There's no preservatives and no shortcuts. Plus, Wildgrain's boxes are fully customizable, so if you're feeling more sweets, you can get delicious giant ginger molasses cookies, blueberry biscuits, or maple Belgian waffles, and throw in some delicious fresh pastas that cook in just minutes for good measure. I absolutely love the Parmesan herb biscuits, the slow-fermented ciabatta sandwich rolls, and the Bavarian pretzel buns. Right now, Wildgrain is offering our listeners $30 off your first box, plus free croissants for life when you go to wildgrain.com/strange to start your subscription today. That's $30 off your first box and free croissants for life when you visit wildgrain.com/strange. Or you can use promo code STRANGE at checkout. While Travis seemed to have no recollection of the previous 5 days, the community in Snowflake had been turned upside down. Back on November 6th, the day after Travis went missing, a pretty extensive search was underway, which included the Navajo County Search and Rescue Team, the U.S. Forest Service, and others from the surrounding area that were trained in how to handle emergencies. A total of around 50 men. Also there were Travis's older brothers, Dwayne and Don, and 5 of the men from the logging crew. Steve apparently refused to even leave his house. In the 1994 movie about this called Fire in the Sky, Steve and Travis really didn't get along, and Steve was uninterested in helping out. I don't know if that's the real reason he didn't help in the search. Maybe he had a history with law enforcement and didn't want to be anywhere near them. Maybe he had a tummy ache. After the search, which turned up nothing, Travis's older brother went to Mike's house with the rest of the logging crew. The brothers were suspicious of the crew and thought they had something to do with Travis's disappearance. So they kind of interrogated the crew, but the men stuck to their story. Dwayne left satisfied that they were telling the truth, but Don was convinced they were covering up for some kind of awful chainsaw murder. For some reason, he believed Alan was the one who'd killed Travis, but he suspected John might also be in on it because Alan and John had had a fight with Travis some while back. The police were suspicious too. During the search, they kept telling John to just tell them where the body was so everyone could go home. And so, on Monday, November 10th, about 4 days since Travis had disappeared, the men agreed to sit for polygraphs. Cy Gilson from the Arizona Department of Public Safety came in to administer the tests. The main focus was to figure out if they did anything to Travis. According to the book Close Encounters, the abduction cases of Betty and Barney Hill, Travis Walton, and Antonio Villas-Boas, quote, he asked the men plainly if they had done any harm to Walton, if they knew where his body was located, and if they had in fact seen a UFO as they claimed, end quote. The only test that came back inconclusive was Alan's, but Alan was clearly agitated during the test. After his test, he stormed out, loudly cursing the examiner and slamming the door behind him. Alan thought it was clear that Gilson had been bought off and had already concluded that they had killed Travis. Gilson would admit that he expected to find some foul play had occurred, but he ended up believing the men. He said, quote, none of the tests, except Alan's, showed anything like that. Alan was just too agitated to be tested at all. Even if his charts were readable and showed foul play, he couldn't have committed a crime and made up a story about a UFO without involving 5 other men whose tests corroborate the report, end quote. Indeed, there's some indication that Alan was given 3 opportunities during the test to answer the pertinent questions, which I assume were about how, in fact, Travis went missing, and the only time it came up as inconclusive was when the wires of the machine had become loose. News had spread, especially within the UFO enthusiast community, and on November 8th, when police went out to do another search, according to the Close Encounters book, they were hindered by a gaggle of reporters, ufologists, and curious onlookers now on site from not just the US, but also from places like the UK. To make matters worse, police were also fielding calls from people claiming to know where Travis was, including one woman who said she was Travis's wife. He wasn't married. And that Travis was safe on Mars. Oh, cool. Thanks. Case closed, I guess. Another call came from a man who claimed to be a retired CIA agent who said the government was involved in Travis's disappearance. All eyes were on Mike and his crew, despite their mostly clean polygraphs, and honestly, who could blame everyone for suspecting the logging crew was up to something? What's more likely, that a flying saucer came down and tossed a full-grown man around and then he disappeared, or that something nefarious had happened and the men were covering their asses? But then, just after midnight on the 11th, Grant Neff's phone rang and it was Travis, very much alive, if pretty disoriented. Considering Travis's condition, Grant and Duane thought it best if he avoid making his reappearance known right away. They knew that it would be an absolute circus, and they wanted to get Travis checked out first for his own safety and well-being. During Travis's absence, a man named Dr. Lester Stewart had shown up in town poking around and asking questions. For some reason, Duane decided to bring Travis to see Dr. Stewart instead of going to the hospital, maybe to avoid reporters, I don't know. But when they brought Travis to Stewart's office, which was in a rundown hotel, Dr. Stewart was like, I'm not a medical doctor, I'm a doctor of hypnosis. Womp womp. He told the men he'd been a medic in the Marines, though, and he had a friend who could perform the necessary medical tests, but apparently when he called said friend, that guy was like, who dis? He had no idea who Dr. Stewart was. Travis would later write the whole thing was, quote, almost funny in the way it revealed Stewart's phoniness. Dr. Stewart, however, had his own version of events, which included his colleague William Spaulding, who Duane didn't even remember being there at all. According to Stewart, Travis and Duane were stalling on the hypnosis they agreed to, demanded physical tests on Travis, and then left in a hurry after Stewart agreed to pay for the testing. After that, their only contact was 2 phone calls. According to Spaulding, he confronted them about the holes in their story, and that didn't make Duane happy. They, quote, accused us of being negative after we questioned him about a couple of holes in the story, end quote, to which Duane said Spaulding was just a publicity seeker and never actually met with Travis. Regardless, Travis eventually sought actual medical treatment from actual medical doctors. At 3:30 p.m. on the 11th, Doctors Joseph Stoltz and Howard Candle ran a battery of tests. The results showed Travis to be in relatively good health, despite Travis claiming he'd lost 10 pounds in the 5-day ordeal. There were no serious issues, but they did note a red spot on his right elbow that looked like an IV puncture wound. The test of his urine showed no signs of starvation. They also tested for ketones, which would be elevated if he hadn't eaten in 5 days. That test came back normal. There was evidence of dehydration and exhaustion, but otherwise, Travis was well nourished. All in all, the tests did not seem to reflect the reality of someone having been lost in the woods for 5 days. There's no way to know if Travis really had lost the weight he said he had. Duane refused to tell authorities where Travis was and said he wanted to wait for Travis to be able to speak for himself. And that's when that bastion of trustworthy journalism, the National Enquirer, got involved. Strangers, I gave a bunch of people Lumi gummies for Christmas this year, and the reviews are in. The flavors, delicious and fun. The vibes, perfect. Whether it was a sativa strain for a creative boost, indica for a mellow wind down, or hybrid gummies, which are specially formulated to bring you the best of both worlds, my friends and family love Lumi gummies. Consistent, mellow, and super delicious, Lumi gummies are specifically designed to make you feel good, not stoned. Whether you're looking for an end-of-day de-stressor, a midday boost, or help getting the best sleep ever, Lumi Gummies has a strain that's right for you. And with flavors like orange cream cookies, Durban Skittles, pina colada kush, watermelon sorbet, you'll be like a kid in a candy shop. Lumi Gummies are available nationwide. Go to lumigummies.com, that's L-U-M-I gummies.com, and use code STRANGE for 30% off your order. Again, that's L-U-M-I gummies.com, code STRANGE. lumigummies.com, code STRANGE. The Enquirer paid for Travis to stay at the Scottsdale Sheraton Inn under a fake name. On November 13th, Travis met Dr. James Harder, another hypnotherapist, who put Travis under the next day to get his version of what happened. The Enquirer also brought in 3 psychiatrists, Dr. Jean Rosenbaum, an expert in polygraphs who had testified to their validity and reliability, Dr. Beryl Rosenbaum, Jean's wife, and Dr. Warren Gorman. These 3, along with Stoltz and Candle, were also present during the hypnosis on the 14th. Here is what Travis said happened to him. The golden disc, hovering 90 feet in front of the truck, was stationary and hovering below the trees. It had clearly defined edges with a soft yellow haze that, quote, illuminated the immediate area with an eerie glow. He estimated it to be 15 to 20 feet in diameter and looked like two pie pans placed together lip to lip. There were no antennae, hatches, ports, windows, seams, and no sounds. He got closer because, as he would later write, quote, I was afraid the thing would fly away and I would miss the chance of a lifetime to satisfy my curiosity about it, end quote. As the crew kept yelling for him to come back to the truck, he got within 6 feet of it and could hear a mechanical sound. Then he heard, quote, a powerful thunderous swell in volume of the vibrations, end quote, that reminded him of turbine generators being started. The saucer started to wobble and spin like a top, so he crouched behind a nearby log before deciding to run back to the truck so they could get out of there. As he got up to run back to the truck, quote, a tremendously bright blue-green ray shot out of the bottom of the craft. I saw and heard nothing. All I felt was the numbing force of the blow that felt like a high-voltage electrocution. The intense bolt made a sharp crack or popping sound. The stunning concussion of the foot-wide beam struck me full in the head and chest. My mind sank quickly into unfeeling blackness. From the instant I felt that paralyzing blow, I did not see, hear, or feel anything more. My body arched backward, arms and legs outstretched, as I was lifted off the ground. I was hurled backward through the air for 10 feet. My right shoulder collided with the hard, rocky earth of the ridgetop. My body lay motionless, end quote. One wonders how he knew he was being lifted and thrown if he didn't see, hear, or feel anything after being struck by that first beam of light, but let's keep going. This, of course, was the last thing the crew had seen before driving off in a panic. And despite having just been tossed back down to Earth, Travis came to somewhere else. The first thing he noticed, though, was not his surroundings, but rather the tremendous pain he was in. Quote, it felt like a bad burn, but it was all over, even inside me. It felt even worse than a burn. It felt like I had been broken into 100 pieces, like I had literally been crushed. I was lying on my back. I summoned all I could muster of the mental pain control I had learned in karate training. First, managing to hold the sensations at bay inch by inch, I gained ground against the tormenting ache. I had a bitter metallic taste on my tongue. My mouth was dry, and I was very thirsty. Oddly, the weakness in my muscles did not seem to come from hunger. The trembling felt odd, like a strange mix of exertion and illness. I had never had a headache in my entire life. Something was terribly wrong, end quote. This is unbelievable. Listen, I was born at night, but not last night. You expect me to believe that this man, in his early 20s, had never had a headache before? I've heard some doozies in my life, but this one really takes the cake. Travis says he then saw a light from above him that, quote, sent daggers of pain into my head. Based on how close the ceiling was, he figured out he was on a table of some sort. His initial thought was that he was in the hospital and needed to figure out what had happened, but he couldn't move. He described the room as being made of a textured, dull, and non-reflective metal. The floor and ceiling shaped like a piece of pie with the point bitten off. The air, he said, quote, smelled slightly stale and muggy. He was sweating and could still feel his jacket under his arms and wondered why the nurse didn't take it or any of his work clothes off. Travis was able to open his eyes just enough to see something across his chest. Quote, it was about 4 to 5 inches thick, and I could feel that it extended from my armpits to a few inches above my belt. It curved down to the middle of each side of my rib cage. It looked like it was made of shiny, dark gray metal or plastic, end quote. That's when he noticed 3 figures standing around him wearing white masks and caps and orange gowns. As his vision cleared, he could then see that he was not in a hospital, and the 3 figures attending him were definitely not human. He was, quote, looking squarely into the face of a horrible creature. A creature was looking steadily back at me with huge, luminous brown eyes that were the size of quarters. Hysteria came over me instantly. I struck out at the 2 on my right, hitting one with the back of my arm and knocking it into the other one. The one I touched felt soft through the cloth of its garment. The muscles of its puny physique yielded with a sponginess that was more like fat than sinew, end quote. Travis described the creatures as just under 5 feet with basic humanoid form. 2 arms, 2 legs, 20 fingers and toes. Their faces had the, quote, normal arrangement of features, but, he continued, quote, other than that, their similarity to humanness quickly became terrifyingly obscure. Their thin bones were covered with white, marshmallowy-looking flesh. They had on single-piece coverall-type suits which seemed to be made of soft, suede-like material of an orangish-brown color. Clothes did not appear to have any seams to hold them together. Very small feet, about a size 4 by our measure. No nails on their fingers. Their hands were small, delicate, and without hair on the backs of them. Their thin, round fingers looked soft and unwrinkled. Their smooth skin was so pale that it looked chalky. The color was not quite that light, but compared to my own, it was like ivory. The skin was delicate and thin to the point that it was slightly translucent, stretched over the curves of their small bodies without wrinkles. Their bald heads were disproportionately large for the size of their bodies. They had bulging, oversized craniums, a small jaw structure, and an underdeveloped appearance to their features. Thin-lipped mouths were narrow, and I never saw them open them. Lying close to their heads on either side were the tiny, crinkled lobes of ears. Their miniature rounded noses had small oval nostrils. The only feature that was not underdeveloped were those incredible eyes. Glistening brown orbs had irises twice the size of a normal human eye. The iris was nearly an inch in diameter, no lashes and no eyebrows. Their overall look was disturbingly like that of a human fetus, end quote. This description fits that of other encounters throughout history. These aliens are what those in the ET-obsessed community would call greys. So, as any human would do in the face of what absolutely looked like aliens, Travis reacted. He managed to get up, and the thing on his chest fell to the floor. The 3 creatures started toward him with their hands reaching out. He grabbed a transparent cylinder from a nearby bench. He tried breaking it, but it wouldn't, and lifted it behind his head to use as a weapon and yelled for the creatures to stay away from him. But just as he was about to go after them, they left the room. Travis left in search of an exit to GTFO and found himself in a larger, round room with a single chair in it that was facing away from him. Unfortunately for us, that was it in that room. I was really hoping for a James Bond villain-style turn of the chair revealing the evil overlord alien who gives an entire monologue outlining their plans to destroy the Earth. But no, just a chair. Travis eventually made it to a hallway and, seeing no one, started running, trying to find a way out. He came across another room. This one was round, about 16 feet across, and the ceiling was 10 feet high, with 2 rectangular outlines spaced evenly apart that he said looked like doors. There was also one singular chair in the middle of the room, facing away from him, that was unoccupied. As he got closer to the chair, the room got darker, with pinpoints of light, quote, like the stars coming into view in the evening, only much faster. He thought maybe it was a planetarium-type thing meant to show him where the craft was. This chair had a panel on one arm, on which was a set of 25 colored buttons. On the left arm was a lever. No words or symbols. There was a screen showing black lines with dashes intersecting them at regular intervals. The buttons on the right arm had 5 rows, each of a different color: red, blue, yellow, green, violet. He started pushing the green buttons, which caused the lines on the screen to move. He tried buttons of other colors, but nothing happened. Travis then tried the lever. Upon moving it, the stars he was seeing around the room shifted. When he pushed the lever forward, quote, the stars began moving downward in front of me in unison. I pulled my hand quickly out of the lever and the stars stopped moving. The handle slowly returned to its original position, end quote. He decided to stop messing with the controls because he thought, quote, I might be messing things up real bad. And then what appeared to be a human entered the room. This being was 6 feet tall, wearing a helmet, muscular, evenly proportioned, weighing about 200 pounds, and had on a tight, bright blue suit made of what looked like a soft velour. Black boots, black belt around the middle, no tools or weapons, no insignia on the clothes, coarse sandy blonde hair that covered his ears, dark complexion, no facial hair, not even stubble, and golden hazel eyes. Though Travis spoke to him, the man never answered him. And this description is a type of ET also documented in other alien encounters throughout history called Nordics because of their resemblance to Scandinavians. This giant alien Swede led Travis to what seemed like a hangar where he could get a view of the outside of the craft. Quote, the outside of the craft we had just left was shaped like the one we saw in the woods, but was very much larger than the first one. It was about 60 feet in diameter and 16 feet high. On my left, toward one end of the large room, there were 2 or 3 oval-shaped saucers that were reflective like highly polished chrome, end quote. They left this room and went into another hallway that led to some double doors leading to a white room where 3 more of these human figures were standing. 2 men and a woman. These had on the same uniform, but without the helmet. They also would not answer him when he spoke to them. They led him to another table. The woman took out what, quote, looked like one of those clear, soft plastic oxygen masks, end quote, and put it over his nose and mouth. When he regained consciousness, he was on the side of the road in Heber. Strangers, we have a new sponsor. Drip Drop is doctor-developed, proven fast hydration that helps your body and mind work better, which is exactly what 2026 you needs. Think clearer focus, better energy, elevated mood, even that fresh skin glow. Drip Drop's science-backed formula is trusted by firefighters, medical professionals, and over 90% of top college and pro teams because it's engineered to rehydrate you faster and more effectively than water alone. I got the sugar-free pack and I love them. They provide the hydration and flavor without the sweetness. The lemon lime is my favorite, but honestly, they're all delicious. To make it easy, Drip Drop has flexible subscription options so you're never stuck without proven fast hydration. Whether you're hitting the gym, juggling work, or just trying to stay consistent with your January reset. I used to think electrolytes were only for athletes or summer workouts, but starting this year, Drip Drop is my secret reset button. When I'm hydrated, my brain just clicks. My mood, focus, and motivation instantly improve. Right now, Drip Drop is offering podcast listeners 20% off your first order. Go to dripdrop.com and use promo code STRANGE. That's dripdrop.com, promo code STRANGE for 20% off. Stock up now at dripdrop.com and use promo code STRANGE. There may have been more to this story, but according to Travis, while undergoing the hypnosis with Dr. Harder, something seemed locked away in Travis's mind that would require deeper hypnotic regression. He wrote, quote, Dwayne told me that after a difficult series of psychological maneuvers, Dr. Harder arrived at a mental block that was enforced by a subconscious warning or threat that I would die if regression continued any deeper, end quote. After Travis told his story, the Inquirer paid for a private polygrapher to come in to test him. Dr. Harder apparently strongly objected, saying it was way too soon to subject Travis to a polygraph, that he was still in the thick of the trauma of the experience, and no test would be accurate because of his stress levels. Nonetheless, Travis took the test administered by John J. McCarthy. The test showed stress, which McCarthy interpreted as deception. Travis spends a good amount of time in his book disparaging McCarthy, taking issue with him because he wasn't a member of the Arizona Polygraph Association, and claiming he asked questions that required assumption over experience and asked a question related to something from Travis's past that he was ashamed of. Apparently, back in '71, Travis and a friend pleaded guilty to breaking into Western Molding Company, stealing checks, and then forging and cashing them. For some reason, after 2 years probation, they were able to change their plea to not guilty, and their records were clean. But I guess McCarthy brought the incident up during the polygraph? I'm no polygrapher, but that seems shady to me. At any rate, McCarthy declared that Travis was perpetuating a hoax and had not been on a spacecraft, and then accused Travis's brother Dwayne of being near violence when he told him his findings. So Travis connected with polygrapher George Pfeiffer for a new test. Pfeiffer had been working as an examiner for 2 years by that point. However, Travis and Pfeiffer worked together on the questions, which understandably created some fodder for the skeptics. Pfeiffer's boss, upon learning that the two worked together to create the relevant questions, called this test invalid. Skeptics said the two polygraphs were evidence that Travis, his brothers, and his logging crew were all trying to pull off a hoax. Polygrapher Cy Gilson, who had originally tested the crew back on November 10th, was more sympathetic, however. Gilson's opinion was that the men believed they saw a UFO and did not harm Travis. Gilson also claimed that polygraphers are 97% accurate and it is impossible for that many people to lie through the tests. So, take that for what it's worth. When it was pointed out that Gilson said he believed they believed what they saw, not that he believed they saw it necessarily, his response was that, quote, examiners always use that sort of slightly non-committal wording in their reports, end quote. A couple of ticks in the not a hoax column were that, one, William Spaulding, remember him, the colleague of the hypnotherapist Dr. Stewart Travis met with in a seedy rundown motel the night he returned? Spaulding had apparently run a test on Travis and detected high levels of magnetism on Travis that night. Look, I don't know what that means, and there's some debate as to whether or not Spaulding was even there, but for people who believe, this is a point in their favor. 2, Travis only knew some of the men on the logging crew for a few days. Why would they all collude to make up this truly unbelievable story about a UFO abduction? Also, not for nothing, but whose abduction story is that they got beamed up 10 feet and then thrown back down, and then they were abducted? Like, why not just say he got beamed up and was just gone, end of story? Spaulding and Stewart floated the idea that Travis just had a really bad LSD trip, but his blood and urine tests came back clean. And this would also mean that all the men on the crew would have had to have been tripping, and, I know some people are reckless, but I don't think that the lead on a logging crew that's behind schedule on a valuable contract would be like, hey, you know what would make this logging more fun? Acid. In order for them to have had a group hallucination like that, which isn't really a thing anyway, they would have had to drop the acid at least an hour before, which would have meant literally wielding chainsaws while tripping. I'm going to go ahead and say they weren't all on acid. Plus, Travis had no history with drugs. Travis would later say, quote, I quickly saw what was happening to the other kids who were deeply into drugs and quit having anything to do with them. I have not touched so much as an aspirin in years. I do not even smoke cigarettes or drink alcohol. I lift weights, practice karate, and involve myself in a lot of sports and activities. I read and try to keep myself informed on a wide variety of subjects. Reality is the biggest kick anyone could want. End quote. I suppose it's possible someone spiked his coffee or something? But then again, they would have had to have spiked everyone's coffee, which I guess is possible, but come on. And again, he tested negative for any drugs or alcohol. But the skeptics would keep on coming. One of the main skeptics on this case was the senior editor for Aviation Week and Space Technology, Philip J. Klass. Klass said he spent months investigating the case before determining it was all a hoax. Part of his conclusion was based on the polygraph testing. He also said there was ample evidence to suggest that Travis was preoccupied with UFOs and alien abductions, despite his claim to the contrary. Travis had voiced a desire to ride in a UFO and told his family not to worry about him if he ever got abducted. Travis admitted to watching an abduction special 2 weeks prior to his encounter before later denying he'd seen it. I mean, listen, I joke about wanting to be abducted all the time. What would be the point of disappearing myself for 5 days just to claim it happened to me? I mean, I guess the potential of a book or movie deal? Both of which, by the way, Travis ended up getting. One big sticking point for Klass was the lack of physical evidence. He wondered where the evidence of fire or flames was if it was, quote, like a grenade went off, as the men had claimed it was. Why weren't all the pine needles burned up or blown away? Why, if Travis hit his shoulder so hard against the rock, was there no bruising or physical damage to him other than that one little puncture mark? In his response to this, Travis said that Klass had fallen into the evidence absence fallacy. In an interview with Larry King on CNN, Travis said, quote, "This is typical of the sort of reasoning pattern this man uses in attacking all UFO cases. He's equating the absence of evidence to the evidence of absence. That's absurd. That's actually a logical fallacy," end quote. Indeed, why would he claim to have been thrown to the ground with no injuries to show for it? Why not just say he got sucked up into the spaceship and Bob's your uncle? Unless it didn't occur to him that people might wonder why he had no bruises or scrapes after being thrown to the ground? But you'd think one of the 7 men who would have had to have colluded to make up this story would have said, "Hey, they'll probably ask why he doesn't have any bruises. Maybe we shouldn't say he got thrown to the ground?" It's worth noting that Klass had been accused of altering quotes and misquoting people to fit his narrative. He also supposedly said that the puncture mark was proof that Travis was injecting LSD. Travis did a FOIA request for a report on an investigation by the FBI against Klass. Though he wouldn't give any specifics on the evidence he read, he said this report suggests that Klass was being paid by a covert government agency to discredit his story by any means necessary, and there were connections between Klass and both the NSA and CIA. Some believed that Mike concocted the whole thing to try to get out of the logging contract because he was so far behind schedule. The logging company gave him an extension after the event, but none of his crew wanted to go back up there. But then, nearly 30 years later, in 2021, Mike posted on his Facebook feed that he doesn't, quote, "believe Travis is an honest person, and therefore I want nothing to do with him," end quote. Mike also went on the show UFO Classified, hosted by Erica Lucas, during which he said he never actually saw Travis get abducted and was starting to have doubts. Mike also said in this interview that Travis's wife Dana, whom he'd married after the event, left Travis and owns Travis's house, where Travis was a hoarder. According to him, the rift began when Travis refused to pay Mike the 35% of the book sales that he was promised. I don't know how much of that is true, but I do know the men appear to have made up, at least according to Facebook, since then. Not only that, but Mike later recanted his statement that he didn't believe Travis. Regardless, there were some people pretty close to the case who would not be convinced. Tracy Torme, the screenwriter of the movie Fire in the Sky, adapted from Travis's book, came right out and said he didn't believe Travis was abducted. Seems like an odd choice of screenwriter to tell the story then, but maybe that's just me. That's like Truman Capote coming out and saying he didn't believe Smith and Hickok killed the Clutter family. Like, why tell the story then? Leave it to someone who believes. In an interview for the Skeptics UFO newsletter in May 1933, Torme said, quote, "I don't think the Travis case is an abduction case. I think it is more of a hit-and-run accident. So my personal feeling is that it was really a one-of-a-kind deal that doesn't fall into the parameters of most of Bud Hopkins-type abduction cases. So many witnesses, gone for 5 days and 6 hours instead of a couple of hours. When he awakened in the UFO, he was not paralyzed, he was not naked, he was not being experimented on medically. He has not had any experiences since then, he didn't seem to have any in childhood, he didn't come back with a lot of scars or anything, so I think all those things break the mold and make this case unique." End quote. I don't know. Having a story that sounds like a dozen other stories seems to me more of an argument for it being made up, no? Like if you're gonna make up an abduction story, wouldn't you try to make it sound like all the others? And am I wrong, or did Travis pretty much claim to wake up in the midst of being experimented on? At the very least, he woke up during experimentation prep. Who's to say what they would have done to him if he hadn't woken up? And where was Travis Walton for those 5 days? Of course, it was much easier to drop off the grid back in the 70s with no cell phones or chipped debit cards, but are we to believe he just hid out in the woods for 5 days? Did he find a motel owner willing to lie for him? To what end? What did he eat and where did he get the food? Why was he not starving, but he was dehydrated? How do you fake something like that? And where were his bruises from hitting the ground? What was the puncture wound on the inside of his elbow? You'd think eventually someone would have come forward to definitively say they were in on the hoax, because at least the 6 men in the truck who witnessed it would have had to have been complicit. The only hint of that was Mike saying he didn't see him get abducted, which was actually true either way. I don't know, stranger. Maybe there are those out there more cynical than me. There are definitely those out there who are smarter than me. And though I can't speak to his intelligence, I can tell you that reporter Jeff Wells, who'd worked for the National Enquirer and had been sent to get Travis's story, later wrote a piece for the Skeptical Inquirer, declaring the whole thing, in his opinion, to have been a hoax. The brief introduction to the piece from the editor at the Skeptical Inquirer points out that the National Enquirer had been running a contest for the most believable UFO story, for which Travis and the 6 other men on the logging crew won $5,000. The intro also calls McCarthy, the polygrapher Travis disparaged, quote, the most experienced polygraph examiner in the state of Arizona. In the piece, Wells claimed that Travis's brother Don was, quote, some kind of psychopath, and that Travis was scared to death of him, as were some of the reporters there trying to get the story. He suggested that Travis was being controlled by Don, who apparently had his own UFO encounter story. Wells' version involves a lot of heavy drinking on the part of Travis, his brother, and others who were brought in to help support their case. His claim was that the polygraphs that 5 of the 6 men in the logging crew passed only showed that they saw some kind of light they couldn't identify in the forest that night, not that they saw a flying saucer. Wells claims that the report he sent back to the National Enquirer was twisted around to become a splashy front-page piece about a verified UFO abduction. In truth, he says, he came away convinced everyone was in it for the money. In July 2008, Travis appeared on the Fox game show The Moment of Truth, where contestants were given a polygraph consisting of 50 questions and then brought on camera to answer 21 of those. The contestants could change their answers if they wanted to. If they were found to be telling the truth, they would earn money. The top prize was $100,000. Travis agreed to go on despite his concerns because he had just been laid off from his job of 11 years. He got all the way to the final question: were you abducted by a UFO on November 5th, 1975? He answered yes, and he was found to be lying. He and his family were visibly shocked. Next time on Strange and Unexplained. In early 1993, the Pickman family moved into a beautiful old Victorian house in Atchison, Kansas. They quickly learned they weren't alone, however, and spent the next couple years trying to survive in the Sally House. Strange and Unexplained is a production of Three Goose Entertainment, Grab Bag Collab. This episode was written by me, Daisy Egan, with research by Keely Hayes, editorial help by Becca DiGregorio, audio engineering and design by the divine Jeff Devine, music by Epidemic and Blue Dot Sessions. If you have an idea for an episode or want to submit a question for an Ask Me Anything episode, head to strangeandunexplainedpod.com and fill out the contact form. I will write back. Eventually. I need an assistant. You can follow me on social media at Daisy Egan or follow the show at SNU Pod and Grab Bag Collab. Stay strange.